Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the peak-to-peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
Welcome back to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. I'm Cynthia Davis.
And I'm Art DeVitalis. Now for this week's news.
This episode is sponsored by Brightwood Music, Hardt's Backhoe, Nederland Feed and Pet, Log Cabin Grooming, The Very Nice Brewing Company, and of course, the Mountaineer newspaper. For our lead story today, we talked to Rob Savoye about the Ice Fest and the great story of how they pulled it off in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. Did you know the Ice Fest more or less started in Nederland?
My name is Rob Savoye. I live over here kind of west of Rollensville. So this year, actually like 2 weeks ago, we had the 26th Ouray Ice Climbing Festival. The interesting part about the Ouray Ice Festival is that a lot of people have forgotten is it was actually started by people from Nederland. People from Nederland actually ran the Ice Festival for the first couple of years. So what happened was when the ice park was originally created the year before the Ice Fest, it became quickly obvious that plumbing was really expensive, especially in January because stuff freezes and you have to replace it. And so Jeff Lowe had just opened his Arctic Wolf climbing and mail order business right now where Backcountry Pizza's Kitchen is. That used to be Jeff's business and stuff. And I used to work on being a tech dude. I used to do Jeff's computer tech support, like I, do for a bunch of people and stuff like that. And then every month he would get together with a bunch of local climbers and we'd all drink beer and show off slides and stuff. And one day Jeff goes, hey, I should sponsor a festival and we'll give all the money to the ice park for funding and I'll use it for marketing my new business. And that's exactly where the Ice Fest came from. And the entire initial crew, other than a few of our friends down in Ouray, were from Nederland.
But how did the fest get along without canceling this year?
Yeah, so this year was interesting because, of course, we're in the middle of a giant global pandemic. So back in almost September, I was talking to one of the board members because, there's a point where you have to decide, right, whether you're going to cancel or not. And so back in September, I was talking to the president of the Ouray Ice Park Board and saying, hey, I'll just stream it to the internet, being slightly facetious and slightly joking, although also a definite possibility. And they're like, really? I'm like, sure. So that's kind of what happened. So we decided to go completely virtual. No spectators, no vendors. The normal, free gear that we typically, one of the big things of the Ice Fest is you can go to, let's say, Black Diamond and borrow an ice axe and a helmet from Pell and go climb in it for a few hours and try it out. So we can't do that this year. So instead, each of the manufacturers spread that out different weekends throughout the entire season, which is actually kind of better. Having no spectators is amusing because we couldn't do our gear auctions because we usually sell a lot of gear really cheap, which is nice for all the new ice climbers. We did them all online this year. And so it worked out, reasonably well. And, financially it wasn't as good as past years, but it actually worked out well enough that the park is going to obviously continue. The park has been open all season and plans to continue doing so. And so now that we've got the technology to stream the Ice Fest, we're going to do it every year.
All right.
In addition to having the regular festival. It'll be on YouTube for probably forever. It's on the Ouray Ice Park YouTube channel. It's 3 hours and 54 minutes. It's pretty long. Initially, we streamed it live, and then there's also going to be an hour-long documentary coming out sometime the next few months. That's about the ice park and the Ice Fest as well, but that's still in production.
This year, international competitors were in short supply, but some rookies got a shot at climbing up the up. We also asked about how to find out more about the documentary when it's released.
My assumption is that when the documentary gets done that the person at the ice park, Bailey, will very likely put it on lots of social media and get some coverage and stuff like that. And we're kind of excited because this year actually did work off because we weren't really sure. You just never know. One of the wonderful things about a pandemic, this is going to sound really corny, is that often we have a lot of international competitors, which is a lot of the fun, right? But some of these international competitors are sponsored and just crush the competition. This year, because all the borders being closed, we had a really young crowd of a lot of new young climbers kind of really getting into their early, professional climbing careers. And that was actually really, really fun to see a lot of the next generation of, high-end climbers really getting their start. I like the international feel a lot, too. I definitely like the younger aspect as well.
And we had to ask how tense it was competing for the climbers.
There were no really tense moments as far as the fest goes. In fact, other than financially, we considered it a success. The only tense moment was me personally when I had to wire high voltage into the video production truck. But that's kind of unrelated to anything else. Well, so one of the fun things about the ice park is it's outside of town. So at one point we're like, they've got a really good Wi-Fi supplier, UrayNet. I happen to be a friend of the owner of the company and stuff, so we talked about doing a wireless connection. At the last minute, we discovered that there was actually a fiber optic connection across the street at the CDOT facility. Oh. So we asked CDOT for permission, which they amazingly gave us in like 2 days. Sure, you can use our fiber. Ran it across the street and ran it down into where the video production truck was going to be. The company Clearworks, based out of Montrose, donated all of that work as well as the bandwidth. And so we wound up running 400 megabits of internet connectivity to Compadre Gorge in January.
And we had to ask about his thoughts on the sport. What's most important and how cold is it?
I guess all I can say is I encourage people that are interested to go try ice climbing and just stay safe, and the ice park is a really good spot to kind of check out this sort of slightly crazy sport that a lot of us really love. I always laugh. Everybody goes, when's it going to be cold ice climbing? I always laugh because actually the biggest problem is overheating. Ice climbing keeps you pretty warm. It's stopping if it gets cold. And of course the best combination is skiing in to go ice climbing, and then you're kind of covering all your addictions at once. The season varies based on weather, which of course global warming really affects ice farming in ways that we actually notice pretty heavily. So some years we're open till the end of March. My gut feeling is probably sometime in the first couple of weeks of March this year. The ice is pretty fat, so that's kind of part of the condition is that once the ice melts to a certain level, you can't let people climb on it because it's not safe. And we're not there yet, luckily. When it gets really warm, it breaks really easily, and falling ice can ruin your day.
Thanks, Rob, for the scoop, and we're excited for the next fest, whether it's on the ice or from the comfort of our homes. Brightwood Music in Nederland has instruments of all kinds in stock. The store is conveniently located at 20 East Lakeview Drive, Unit 109. When you buy an instrument from Brightwood, it comes complete with a setup from a professional staff member. They also offer repair on any stringed, fretless, or fretted instruments. Brightwood Music is family-owned and operated.
Your newest music maker is waiting to be picked up. The store is open weekly, Wednesday through Sunday, so stop by, try something out, and stay and play a while. If you're more comfortable with a socially distant appointment, just call 303-258-8863 or visit at Brightwood Music on Facebook for regular deals and updates.
Check to see if you qualify today for Energy Outreach Colorado. Call 1-866-432-8435 or 303-825-8570, and you may be available for a bill reduction on what you pay currently. There are also several programs available for recipients of Social Security income in the Nederland area, including SNAP or Social Security Disability income. Low-income energy assistance, free weatherization, free insulation, air sealing, storm windows, furnace repair, and LED lighting may be other options.
If you are paying 30% of your income for utilities, you probably are eligible for help. So far, it appears that 13 Nederland residents are eligible, but more may qualify. The Nederland Board of Trustees and Sustainability Advisory Board are also investigating ways to get discounted solar panels and grants for low-income and middle-income Nederland residents. Stay tuned, and to find out more, visit www.energyoutreachcolorado.org.
Free COVID tests are available at the Nederland Community Center every Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m. No appointment or an ID is required.
Boulder County is currently vaccinating moderate-risk healthcare workers, other frontline workers, and those aged 70 years or older. For information on vaccinations or to sign up to be notified of when and where to get the COVID vaccine, go to www.bouldercounty.org.
Gilpin County is registering healthcare workers, first responders, and people over 70 for COVID-19 vaccines. The phone number to register is 303-515-4342. Community Champion nomination forms are now available at surveymonkey.com/r/peak community champions. Forms will be due February 28th, 2021, with the winners to be featured in the Mountaineer newspaper.
Enter the Gilpin County Arts Association's 74th Annual Juried Art Show. Email callforentry.org to enter. The deadline for entry is April 19th, 2021.
The Returning Community Champions celebration will recognize your neighbor, your friend, your mentor, and even your relative who has done good work for everyone.
Categories to be recognized include Lifetime Achievement, Teen of the Year, Educational Excellence, Local Business of the Year, and Volunteer of the Year. In March, these local heroes will be honored with a beautiful certificate and a gift card for dinner at a local restaurant, and that will be dine-in or takeout.
Current sponsors are the Peak to Peak Communities Project and the Mountaineer newspaper. Now for music correspondent Dango Rose with artist Sam Burchfield. Take it away, Dango.
All right, this is Dango Rose, and my guest Sam Burchfield is with us today. How's it going, Sam?
Doing good. Glad to be hanging out.
Yeah, it's good to be hanging out. You're in Atlanta, Georgia. Is that correct?
I am far from Colorado in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
With better weather than you.
And here in Colorado, on the day of this taping, we have fallen trees. I say trees because it's literally half of a tree. And there's actually a hummingbird out my window, kind of looking for the hummingbird feeder that came down because of the branches. It's actually really interesting to see a hummingbird in a snowstorm. I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
It's really not natural. Yeah, it's very unnatural, which is the theme right now, right?
Yeah, it does seem to be the theme. So relating that back to folk music, it kind of does remind me of, just being a voice for the people, spreading awareness and bringing things to light in the world. For you, Sam, what is the role of a folk musician, just in general and during these times?
Yeah, I think that's actually is a good segue, as random as it seemed, because I think folk is so connected. When you think about folk art, it's something about it is so connected to the land and the cultures of a specific area. For me, or a specific culture, people. And so I think sometimes with modern folk music, we've gotten away from that to where it just means acoustic instruments as just a general, vague thing that someone on the street might say, like, I like folk music. But when stuff really starts to happen in your community, whether it's these, protests, COVID, fires, snowstorm, all the things, and even in our own personal lives, I think that's this flag of like, hey, this needs a voice. And I like to think that folk musicians specifically are sort of that voice for a specific geographical area or specific people or even like a family, like the units that sort of express it. And it can, through these stories and ultimately in those stories, like carrying truth out is what I like to think of as an artist, and specifically a folk artist. We're sort of digging up this truth and uncovering it, wrestling with it, and carrying it out into the world. We're not walking around with our little satchel like a couple hundred years ago, but we're sort of doing that virtually now.
Yeah, interestingly, we are doing it virtually now. And it, like you said, it does sort of transcend instrumentation. Like, it's not just about the acoustic guitar and the harmonica and the folk singer anymore. Like, it's taken on a new life, especially in the 21st century. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think it's like the unboxing of folk music. And because if you think about it, the instruments are so connected to the time and the people and the place. There's so many traditional instruments that if you think about like a traditional Irish folk like group, it's specific. And so maybe when you think about the 21st century folk group, you know, people are going to start, especially late, I'm thinking about like 100 years from now, it might be only electronic, and that might be sort of like this old timey thing, like old folk music that is just like synthesizers and whatnot, if it's expressing the sentiment of a specific people and place, I think. But I mean, I'm definitely partial to the rawness of acoustic instruments and the power they have, but I'm definitely not closed off to all the modern ways that folk is expressed.
And folk music in general, to me, expresses the will of the people. Of course, then at the same time, in the current political climate, it doesn't always represent the will of all the people. So I get into this thing right now where if a musician takes a political stand on a social media platform, I've been spending far too much time on my phone, then people sometimes will start attacking that musician. Most recently, it was Joan Baez for posting a picture of Dr. Fauci, and her stating that, you know, she trusts in science more than a one-sided political argument or whatever. In a sense, been almost like a revolutionary in some ways.
I think sometimes, yeah, I would think that's sort of from the position of what I think of as speaking truth. Like, you're always going to you're going to bump into, like, there's hard truth right now, I think, that people are trying to wrestle with and to speak out. And that sort of naturally causes revolution if something that contradicts that is happening. You know, you think about the 60s and some of the folk that came out of that. It was a lot of talking about similar things now, obviously, with civil rights and taking care of the environment and all these things. I think that's part of it. But the interesting thing is, yeah, like you said, like, it's not always all the people. Like, I think that's the thing where we're so globalized, where we sort of loop things together. And but I think you can go down on such a micro specific level with folk, where you have, you know, one specific area of, you know, Western North Carolina has a very different view of the world and what they would sing about and tell stories about than one specific area of New York City, like a specific, you know, borough or whatever. Like, that's sort of this weird thing about it. I don't know, maybe there's a more scholarly definition of folk music. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing to wrestle with, because on any level we're still categorizing it, and I think a lot of the movement and the world and culture is this weird simultaneously categorizing, but also more specifically categorizing, if that makes sense. So we're taking away the boundary of folk, and in that realm we're expanding it. But in the same realm, you have like 50 gazillion subways to now generalize it in order to still give it its uniqueness of, well, I'm an electro folk fusion artist. And part of that is the need to like identify ourselves and be unique, but also from the balance of it, where we're like, well, we also don't want to box ourselves in too much. it's a weird thing as an artist to figure out sometimes.
It is interesting because it sort of feels like are you singing about, or, cultural issues of the day, or political or social or emotional circumstance that everybody can relate to? Like folk music is relatable, and is instrumentation and is the sound specific to a certain region or culture in the world? And then as that becomes more globalized, then how does, electronic synthesized sounds, play into that as well? Because that's becoming more of a broad frame spectrum of culture in itself, with the increase of technology and a global sort of culture and sound. I also really feel that folk music is world music. I think of like Chan Chan, Cuba, Buena Vista Social Club, kora players in West Africa and Senegal, sitar in India and tabla, the oud in the Middle East, and, telling stories and telling songs.
Yeah, I think that's so true to the way the instrumentation changes culturally. And it's funny because it does seem like it's like the Western world that has lost its cultural identity, because it is more of a melting pot than most places, especially America, where we're bringing a lot of different cultures. And I think a lot of, especially minority cultures, have experienced in the past 100 years this sort of whitewashing and losing some of their even instrumentation. And I think there's a reclaiming of that right now. But the interesting thing is, for those of us that have grown up maybe in America or the Western, worlds and countries, it's almost like we're reaching back, trying to figure out what our heritage is, or what our, and I think from people from all, ethnic backgrounds that have grown up as Americans are sort of looking back like, well, okay, I grew up this way. And like, I don't know, like the Beatles are this weird, like they're not even American, but they're like part of this lineage of, like, when we think of, the blues coming out of the South and Chicago, and this sort of journey of American quote unquote culture. And so folk music finds its way in there, but we sort of connect it to like the whole progress of music in the Western world. But meanwhile, there's people in Indonesia that are playing the same instrument they've played for 1,000 years, and a tradition that's so deep and anchored. I wonder, are we in a way just lost here? We're trying to find what is, folk music? Is it acoustic guitar? Is that what it's become in this weird way, where we try to connect that to our, American story? But then it's, again, like we said, like America is so big and so vast that the American story is not this one unified thing. And it's so mixed because every major historical event that's happened in the United States is multi-sided. And a lot of times one side's getting beaten up and doesn't have a voice, and one side writes history and it does. Neither one is 100% right or wrong. It's just a big old confusing thing sometimes when you start to dig into it, I think.
And we have so many amazing cultures within this one country. And like, would you agree that like that is all American folk music?
See, I would, with the way I think about it. And I think, so that, goes back to the whole thing about like, maybe the stereotype of folk music is like Bob Dylan, acoustic guitar, or like banjo-led music that goes into bluegrass and all of that. And, but think about the magnitude and the impact of those subcultures within the States. And mostly coming from the African and then African-American tradition is like, that's some huge folk music that influenced everything else. And is so, with New Orleans especially, like so specific to a region and a people and, the geography and all of it, and instrumentation even. That connects back much more to what we think of as world music than a lot of general descriptions of folk that we use sometimes.
Thank you, Dango. Stay tuned for part 2 next week.
We caught up with Chris at the Town of Nederland about the new Transportation Improvement Program project, with Jefferson Street and other updates planned with the acquired funding.
Yeah, my name is Chris Pelletier. I'm the Town of Nederland Public Works Manager. In August of 2018, staff became aware of this grant opportunity. And it's a grant opportunity offered through CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, and then the funds are managed through DOCSA, which stands for Denver Regional Council of Governments. Grant funds are for multimodal improvements, alternative transportation, regional connectivity, economic vitality. Funding occurs every 4 years. And so, we're got permission to submit it. Came up with a concept first. I submitted it to the Board of Trustees, and the concept is essentially what I've been talking about the past 8 or so months, a sidewalk that connects RTD to Nederland downtown by the Visitor Center, by the sidewalk along to the town hall.
So a lot of this has to do with sidewalks.
Yeah, I mean, it's not set in stone. We haven't submitted the plan for 30% design yet. We're real close. I've been going to multiple boards. I mean, first of all, we created a document called an Owner's Project Requirement. And it takes into account the various values of Netherlands town boards and what they want to incorporate into the project. So that helps guide us. The project keeps getting refined a little bit more each time. So the design you see now, located on the town's website, is pretty darn close. So close to what it's going to be. It's still changing a little bit. We hope to bring a more or less final 30% version to DOT at the beginning of March. And then submit that plan to CDOT for their sort of review of the 30% design and get their blessing on it. And then we'll move forward to it.
And even though funding has been acquired, specific portions of the planning phase are still being adjusted.
It's on the town's website. I think it's on their front page. And it says TIPP, Transportation Improvement Program Project. And then on there, there's a list of meetings. And it gets updated every couple of weeks. We'll be attending PDA meetings next week and give them a brief update on it.
And here's the $1 million question. When will all this be completed by the current estimates?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have until 2023 spend the funds. I was hoping to get a majority of the project done this summer. Carrying that project at Pell is a complicated process with trying to coordinate with Excel and entry. But I'm hoping to do that pretty April. I guess do that from April and May. It would be possible to start the sidewalk section in the summer. And I think if that goes through, it might be able to save it and do all the work by fall. But it's hard to say. It's construction, and there's a lot of unpredictable factors involved. But it doesn't happen this summer, certainly by next week.
Thanks, Chris, and we look forward to the facelift, easier access, and improvement in the downtown area.
And that's all for this week's episode of the Mountaineer Podcast.
Pick up this week's edition of the Mountaineer in print.
And go online to www.themtnear.com to catch up on more local news. I'm Cynthia Davis.
And I'm Art DeVitalis. Until next time, thank you for listening.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local peak-to-peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.